Hi, my name is Scott McEwen, author American Sniper, and you're watching The Rebound with Matt Doherty.
Welcome to The Rebound with Coach Matt Doherty.
Welcome to The Rebound. I am Matt Doherty, and I'll be your host. On this show, we explore remarkable rebound stories of resilience and recovery. We highlight the leadership qualities that emerge in the face of life's toughest challenges, revealing the strength and determination within individuals that inspire us all. With me today is someone that studied what it's like to be in the pressure-packed theater that is war. Today's guest is Scott McEwen. Scott is a trial attorney in San Diego, California. He grew up in the mountains of Eastern Oregon, where he became an Eagle Scout, where he loved to hike, to fish, to hunt at every opportunity presented. Scott works with and provides support for several military charitable organizations, including the SEAL Team Foundation. His interest in military history, intense patriotism, and experience with long-range hunting rifles compelled him to accurately record the battlefield experiences of Chris Kyle, the most lethal sniper in United States military history. This story became the New York Times bestseller, American Sniper. Yes, American Sniper was turned into an Academy Award-winning movie starring Bradley Cooper and directed by the legend Clint Eastwood. Scott, thank you for being on the show. Tell us about what went into writing American Sniper.
Well, essentially, I was then I'm a recovering lawyer, and then I was doing a lot of work with the SEAL teams pro bono, which is essentially for free. You know, when they have either personal problems or family problems, or people trying to rip the wife off, from getting the car fixed or something of that nature. I would step in and give as much assistance as I could to get the matter resolved in favor of the military family or person or whomever else. And as a result of that, I got to know Chris Kyle, and then became kind of drinking buddies with Chris. And during his third deployment, and when he came back for his workup here in San Diego, which he was with SEAL Team 3 at the time, and I was fascinated to hear not only Chris's stories but his friends' stories of Chris's war experience and their war experience, collectively. And as a result of that, I kind of talked Chris into writing American Sniper, and we started recording right after he's, at that point in time, at the end of his third deployment, and then work up for his fourth.
How I know a few people in military, SEALs, Delta Force. They don't really like to talk about themselves. They don't really like to talk about what goes on. How did you get Chris to open up?
You're exactly right, and particularly with SEALs. I think Chris, at the end of the day, it wasn't so much him not willing to open up to me. It was his decision to ultimately do the book. And that was he had to get to know me, and we were friends for probably working on a year before I ever convinced him. I said, look, your story is so important, I think, to this country and to the experience that people are having. And Chris was really upset by the fact that, people would go to the mall, and essentially many Americans didn't even know we were at war. And I said, that's why I really believe your story is so important, was not only, that aspect of it, but also the family aspect of it, and we were very candid in the book about, some of the problems that him and Teo were having. And the problems they were having were primarily the fact that, he'd been deployed what was then working on 10 years. And not unlike a lot of the other, men and women of the military that did back-to-back deployments, some of them for working into 20 years. I mean, if you can believe that, somebody is at war for 20 years, and how difficult that is, not only on themselves, but on their families. I mean, it's because we've never had a generation of warfighter that has been at war for that long and constantly at war. And and the 1% that were doing the work and defending the interests of this country, abroad and at home, I think weren't really understood by the other 99%. And that's the reason I believe that the book and the movie were so successful, is people finally had a waking up, if you will, experience to our band of brothers. I mean, really, it was the war that this generation fought, for this country for a long, long time. We were in Afghanistan for over 20 years and in Iraq for, a substantial amount of time as well. And I felt like it was really important, and I convinced Chris that this just wasn't his story. It was everybody's story, and nobody had really told it, and especially from a pro-American, pro-military standpoint.
I'm getting goosebumps as you talk, and obviously that book was turned into an Academy Award-winning movie. Let's go back to the book, though. What and you're touching on, Americans. What do Americans need to know about the men and women that serve our country in war?
Well, I think what they need to know is that, while these wars maybe don't affect us in the way, say, for example, my father, who was in the military, I was not. But my father told me about the efforts during, say, for example, World War II, and the fact that there was, rationing of sugar, rationing of tires, rationing of rubber, rationing of, this and that. Like, the people here at home, they knew that they were at war. Whereas now, particularly, I think with the sandbox wars, as I sometimes refer to them, nobody even knew we were at war. I mean, you might hear about it every now and then or whatever else, but other than the families that were actually involved, it had no personal effect, in a meaningful way, in my opinion, upon the people here and upon the populace for the sacrifices that those men and women were making. And we were losing a lot of troops, particularly in the SEALs. A lot of men died. I went to a lot of funerals, and, but for that community, nobody knew what was going on. And I felt like it was important that people at least knew the efforts and the things that these men and women were making towards this country. And that was really my push to get this book done. And it was Chris's reasoning as well. By the end, he's like, dude, we got to tell these people what's going on here. And I think that's what was so important in the message of American Sniper. People finally realized, that there's a lot of damage done, and there's a lot of personal, sacrifice by people. And even when you leave the war, when you've been at war for that long, you really don't leave the war.
What did you learn about our country, about our military, about war? What was our why? Why were we there? And what message, how did you try to message that to the American people through your book and through the movie?
I didn't try and answer the question per se of why we were there. I mean, that's for some people to debate in a different room at a different time than really what I was trying to accomplish in my work with Chris. What I was trying to say was, and Chris maybe said it best, I don't choose where you send me. You choose where you send me. I'm the one that has to be sent and do the work that you want me to get done. And so that book and that work was really written in a point of view of the warrior, as opposed to the nation, looking at the warrior. It was more like, look, this is what you're asking the warrior to do, and you damn well better respect what we've done in asking them to do this, because they're giving their bodies, their souls, their limbs, many times their lives, and their families are still left here, and and all the people that support them are still left here. And we as a nation, I don't think, stepped up to the plate and supported them as much as we could. And it's always an argument of mine that we need to, support the men and women that do this work. So, I mean, I'm very active in my role and in my writing role to let people know that the warrior is the one that has to do the work. It's not the Pentagon. It's not the Joint Chiefs. It's not these people. It's the guy on the ground. It's the SEAL team guy carrying a machine gun, kicking in the door, and waiting for the fire to come at him.
You accurately recorded the experiences of Chris Kyle, the most lethal sniper in U.S. history. What did you learn about Chris? What was the most fascinating thing about Chris and his skill as a sniper?
Well, I think Chris once again would defer to and say that he's not the best. He wasn't the best shot. He wasn't the best, if you will, at while he certainly is in that group. He didn't. He said, there's others, Carlos Hathcock, who's white feather in Vietnam, whatever, that was possibly or probably better than him at warfare, if you will, and at sniping. But what happened to Chris was he had an uncanny ability to step into, as one of his officers once told me, he's like a moth to the flame. When you brought him in, it just seemed like everything descended upon that battle, that situation, and he had to deliver the goods, especially in his overwatch position, for the men that were on the ground and the Marines on the ground that were taking a lot of the fire. And so as a result of that, Chris, honed his skill to the point where it almost became supernatural. It really did.
What goes into being a sniper?
I think it's a combination of many skills. Obviously, your shooting skills, your leading skills, your working with different rifles, different situations. But I think what's important for a sniper is you must identify and eliminate threat almost immediately. In other words, you can't sit around and think about what's going on when you got somebody that's driving down a street about to set off a bomb or whatever other situation you might be put in. You have to make a decision split second at that point, and you have to have the skill set to deliver what is a lethal shot, on the enemy at that point. And, and those guys in the SEAL teams, I will say this, the Marines as well, but definitely the SEAL teams, they're really good at what they do. I mean, they're very, very good, and they're very well trained. And, whereas, and the other thing about Chris too is, they're force multipliers. I mean, a lot of people don't realize what that means, but a force multiplier is essentially you got one man on the field, and you might have 13 young Marines that just got out of Camp Pendleton that had a 6-week training course, 6 weeks. These guys are trained for 18 months, every single SEAL, before they get their trident, before they're ever even made a SEAL. They must go through extensive training and 18 months, hardcore, every day, extremely difficult, extremely physical training. And by the time you become a SEAL, you're lethal. You're very lethal, but you also have skills of leadership that you can take those young Marines and basically say, look, this is how you do it. This is how you stay alive. If you listen to me, I will keep you alive. And this is what the job is we need to get done.
Well, let's go to break. And when we come back, Scott is going to discuss the rebound of our country. OMJ Clothing is an elite men's clothing store that provides a vast array of spectacular brands of men's lifestyle apparel for every day. Elevate your business upscale casual at OMJ. Success comes from standing out. Scott, tell us about how our country can rebound from a military standpoint.
Well, I'll go a little bit backwards and then back to your question, if you will, Coach. And the way I would respond to that is this. I know Donald Trump. I'm biased. I mean, I know him. I personally wrote a book with Ryan Zinke called American Commander. And Ryan was also a SEAL, but he was a commander at SEAL Team 6, and Trump made him his Secretary of the Interior. And Ryan is a very good friend of mine, and he took a lot of personal shots. Personal shots, because the Democrats, and I'll be, I'll admit my bias. I think there was some stuff that was done that was wrong as to Trump and as to the military and as to people like Ryan, who undertook jobs like the Secretary of the Interior. And his job as Secretary of the Interior is not so much different than, say, for example, what Kash Patel is going to be asked to do with the FBI or Elon or whatever else with Doge, etc. They need to clean up the government. I mean, they need to clean up the crap that's gone on, and we all know it's gone on, but nobody's willing to take the bite the bullet and go do it. And so I think that what's good is that this country, I think, finally realizes, and I think the re-election of Trump is an affirmation, not so much of their love for Trump, because I mean I think a lot of people maybe didn't like Trump personally in his style or whatever else, and I can appreciate that. I mean I personally know the family, know him, and so I don't have an issue with that. And but what I will say is this: the country realized that we damn well better lace up our boots, get serious about what we got to get done here, and win, or we're going to lose. We are in a position now where, as a nation, I feel we were falling behind in a lot of areas, militarily, economically, in a lot of other, geopolitical issues that are going on out there that I don't know if a lot of people realize, the dangers of some of these wars that have been allowed to slip upon us. But I will say this: I think it was an affirmation, and I was really proud of the country, from an American standpoint, not from a writer standpoint, but from an American standpoint. I was proud that people stepped up and said, you know what, this is the best thing for us, and we've got to take this pill now. We've got to take this medicine now, because if we don't, I'm not sure we're going to have anything to give our kids. And I think that a lot of people really realize that and pass the test, because I felt as if the administration that leading up to this could give a darn about anything but staying in power. And I'll tell you right now, I don't think Donald Trump needs the power. I don't think, maybe he wants it, I don't know, but I don't think these people that are volunteering their time and to be abused. And getting back to Ryan Zinke, I think he was sued like 14 times personally by the Democrats just to stop his programs of what he was doing with as Secretary of the Interior. But the bottom line is, all these things that these men and women decide to do, it's going to take a toll on them. And I think that, the Tulsis and, and the other people and the other men and women that are willing to step up and take this abuse. I mean, my hat's off to them, because maybe you think, oh, well, they're going to be secretary of this or whatever else, but they're taking a lot of fire and they're stepping out in the front. And, it's not without abuse that they're going to take in the backside. That's for sure.
Over the last 4 or 5 years, as I've been doing some radio and podcasts and shows like this on the First, I always questioned why were people wanting to destroy the fabric of our country. And the more I read, the more the word communist popped up. You spent time in Hollywood. You live in Southern California. The influence of Hollywood on our country. And I watched the show, movie Reagan, and his dealings with the Communist Party in the Hollywood. What do you see? You're a conservative guy. You put this movie out. You were told the movie's not going to make money, and it became #1. How do you combat that? How do we as a country combat that in Hollywood?
I think Clint Eastwood, who I had the opportunity to work with on American Sniper, and who's an amazing American, an amazing man, and truly an icon. And I really like Clint, but beyond my like of the man, I respect him, and I respect his attitude and his belief in this country. And and Clint maybe put it best to me, one time on set, I said, Clint, how do you deal with these people? How do you deal with this attitude and whatever else? He said, Scott, I just do what I can in my place, in my situation, in my lane. I try and bring the word and try and bring as much reality to what I believe is the truth. And if they're going to have their own political views, whatever else, I'm not going to change that. But I can bring good stories about true American heroes to the screen, and hopefully they will come. And, and I think American Sniper, which is his biggest movie, and which is the biggest war movie of all time, and I'm not saying that to brag, that's just a fact of the matter, is...
If it's the truth, you ain't bragging, brother.
Yeah, it was an affirmation of Clint's attitude that I'm just going to bring it and let them come and see what they want to do. And, the reaction to that movie, I went and used to saw it, whatever, incognito. I would just go and watch it, and watch the reaction of the audience. And the reaction of the audience to that movie was absolutely brilliant. I mean, it was either dead silence or dead silence then clapping, or dead silence clapping, standing up, all the above.
You say Clint, like I say Kelly, which is my wife's name. Clint, like Clint Eastwood, like, How did that come about? And the introduction, the first phone call, the first handshake, what was that like?
Clint was always our first choice, even when Chris was still alive. We had written the book, and we'd been approached by both 20th Century Fox and by Warner Brothers. We ended up doing the deal through Andrew Lazar, who does Mad Chance, a company called Mad Chance Productions. He's a producer. Great man, honest man, very rare in that town. And Andrew told me honestly, he said, "Look, I did Space Cowboys, which is another great movie, with Clint Eastwood," and he said, "I can't guarantee you that Clint will even look at this because we at that time not had the script written yet by Jason Hall." But he said he'll only read scripts. He doesn't read books per se. But he said, "I will tell you this is going to get in front of him. And if you guys do the right work in getting the script together and everything else, I think there's a darn good chance he might pick this up." Fast forward, Chris is killed, becomes a Greek tragedy. The ending of the movie obviously changed from what that was in the book because Chris was with us. And so then we get, Steven Spielberg picks it up. And Steven in his own right, I'm not saying he's not a great movie maker or they didn't do good work with, obviously Band of Brothers and that whole line of movies. But, I didn't think he was the right guy for it. And this, I honestly thought, well, Steven's attitude towards guns is a little bit different than Chris's or mine. Whatever, Chris was killed by a gun, this could be, difficult for the ending. And then Steven dropped it, which that's a good thing to the extent that, not that he picked it up and dropped it, but the fact that Steven Spielberg recognized it as being that caliber of movie. And then I received a phone call from Clint Eastwood a week afterwards, and Clint said, "I'm calling you up to see if I can direct your movie." Didn't even say who it was. I said, "I know exactly who this is. I know exactly who this voice is. And you were the choice from day one. You're who Chris and I wanted from day one. I would love to see you direct this movie."
You got Bradley Cooper, and I listened to an interview where you interviewed Bradley Cooper. Like, what's it like for you? Your background's an attorney. You grew up in Oregon, Eagle Scout, and here you are interviewing. Like, "Bradley, I'm not so sure if you're right for this movie, but we'll interview you." What was that like?
Yeah, it's interesting too because I had him on the cell phone and he called me up and said, "I'm thinking about playing it." And I said, "You know what, dude? I mean, I really appreciate his acting because he had just done, I can't remember the name of the movie, but it was the one where they had the pill you take and you become super good, whatever." And I said, "I know you have the depth for it, but dude, you got to get dirty. I mean, you got to get dirty here. You got to get sand in your teeth, and and this is not going to be a fun experience, nor was it." And and Bradley's like, "I want to do it." And I called up Chris and I said, "Look, I got a 3-time best looking man on earth talking to you on the phone here," which Bradley was at that time, People Magazine. I said, "He's telling me he's got the guts to do the movie, but let's talk to him a little bit." And Chris and I gave it to him hard, and the way a SEAL would with Chris, saying, "Look, this is the stuff that's important to me, and it's important to me that my friends are looked after in this movie, and that this is respectful and everything else." And Bradley's like right down the line. He's like, "Look, dude, you got my word." And you know what? Bradley delivered, and I was extremely proud of the work that Bradley did as well because he brought it. He brought it, and he lived it, and he lived that accent every day on set. I was there on set. And he would talk to me in that Texas drawl of Chris, and he'd say, "Scott, if I ever say anything that doesn't sound like Chris, I want you to stop me immediately, and I want you to tell me, do it like this." He said, "It's not critical. I'm trying to learn this man." And I said, "Bradley, I will do it." And he was brilliant.
That's awesome. Scott, thank you for joining us today and sharing on the Rebound with Coach Matt Doherty. Leadership is a learned behavior. We all lead in some way, shape, or form. We all deal with adversity. And when you do, I challenge you to rebound. I challenge you to learn and grow. If you would like to contact me about executive coaching or giving a keynote talk, you can reach me at dohertycoaching.com. That's DOHERTY coaching.com. Thank you for tuning in.